Officially started. Awesome. Well, happy Monday, November 3rd. It's a Christmas movie countdown month right now. We're a little bit of a different situation here in the CKF room just because there was a technology challenge in the main council chamber, which we hope to get sorted out quickly. So I should start us off in a good way and acknowledge that we are on the unceded and traditional territories of KC, Kwantlen, Mackinac, and Semi-Hamwood First Nations. For our special meeting, we do have an agenda in front of us. Is there any changes anybody would like to make? Yes.
I would like to remove the October 20th minutes from the agenda.
There's nothing.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
So, okay,
Never mind.
cool. Any other changes? So would anybody like to move the agenda as presented? So Councillor Albrecht and Councillor Solian for the discussion. Then I'll call the question. All those in favor, opposed, so it's carried. I'll move that we enter the committee of the whole, seconded by Councillor White for the discussion. And then I'll call the question. All in favor, opposed, so it's carried. Mr. Chang, over to you.
All right. Thank you, Mayor and Council. So before you is the amended financial plan. So we made a few tweaks to the financial plan. And it's been uploaded and included in the agenda package. Here's a bit of an overview of the areas that I'd like to go over today. From a really high level of financial plan process, and then we'll go over some of the amendments that were made to the plan. And then we'll jump straight to the questions, follow-up items that we followed up on the operating plan portion as well as the funding source. And then we'll jump into the capital improvement plan questions. And then we'll briefly go over what the next steps would actually look like. Over the last little bit, we presented the draft financial plan. Last council meeting on the 20th, we went over an in-depth presentation. So today on November 3rd, we're just going to go over some final remarks and hopefully address any outstanding questions and feedback from council. After that, we're gonna introduce the bylaw as well as hold financial plan open house and so forth. So the Langley City website has been updated. It now has the 2026 financial plan information on the website. The Let's Chat Langley City, we're planning on launching that on November 18th. So we're working with communications to get that running. So the amendments to the financial plan. So there were a few amendments that we made to the financial plan. One of them was we received the municipal property tax survey results, so that's been included in the financial plan now. We made because we received some last some last information from one of our neighboring municipalities, so we had to update the mayor and council remuneration for 2026 budget as well. There were some finer tweaks to the miscellaneous expenses as well. And based on the information that we received from Metro Vancouver, we also updated the sewer and drainage and the water rates as well. And the updated financial plan has the year-to-date 2025 actual revenues and expenditures as well. And as a result of the 2025 financial plan amendment, we made a few updates to the reserve opening balances. Overall, the tax impact has been revised down. It's at 1.6 million still, but the rate has gone down to 3.57%. It was previously at 3.58. So this is a schedule that kind of shows the preliminary dollar impact as well as the revised dollar impact. So as you can see, majority of the line items remain consistent with the exception of the mayor and council remuneration as well as other expenses. The dollar impact for other expenses is roughly around 2,500. Mayor and council, we reduced it down by approximately 10,000. So on this particular slide, you're gonna see the revised 2026 tax impact overall. That shows the municipal taxes as well as the dollar impact for water and sewer adjustments as well, based on the information that we received. From a really high level, the dollar impact for all categories has been reduced. And a few slides down, we're gonna go over the allocation between the city as well as Metro Vancouver cost implications. Year-to-date actuals, the consolidated revenues increased by roughly around 4.1 million. The expenditures increased by 4.4. Transfers to reserves increased by 1.7 million. So we're looking at a year-to-date net surplus of roughly around 20.6 million. We do have another slide further in this presentation that will go over what we predict the final surplus is going to be for the end of this year. So we can touch base a little bit in that slide. The FTE count has remained consistent in the revised plan. And that's because the FTE is based on the projected FTE to the end of the year. So if there isn't any significant changes to departures and new hires and all that, then it's going to remain consistent for the rest of this year. So within the financial plan itself, we actually have this information in a table format. But for the purpose of this particular presentation, we wanted to provide a visual to kind of show where the city of Langley sits in comparison to the other municipalities within Metro Vancouver. So the majority of our taxpayers here at Langley City is basically within this particular category, multifamily dwelling. And as you can see, when we're factoring city taxes and the utility rates, we're amongst one of the lower municipalities in the Metro Van. And this particular graph shows where we sit for single family dwellings. So we are still considered one of the lower municipalities as well, in comparison to some of the neighboring municipalities. Any questions so far? Okay, so we're going to be jumping into the operating plan follow-up questions. So one of the questions was, will the city be presenting municipal tax increments and utility rate increments separately? What percentage of the utility fees are added by the city? So we're going to follow a similar format to last year. So whatever is presented last year is what we'll be doing at the open house and all that kind of stuff. When it comes to water rates, the city's increase is roughly around 4.6%. And this represents roughly around 42.3% of total expenditures. Metro Van increase was 8.4%. And that represents the remaining portion, which is 57.7% of total expenditures. Yeah.
So just as a quick question, if I may, because I know Metro just passed their budget for 2026, and we saw that at the Council of Councils. Is that rate sort of based on the preliminary budget that is now, I guess it's not preliminary anymore, but is that the approved thing in the Metro budget that they approved last week?
I believe it is, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Councillor
Solana?
42.3% of total expenditures
Yeah,
of the city.
total expenditures for this particular fund, so for the water expenditures, for fiscal 2026. We budgeted 7.86 million. So 42.3% of that is controlled by us, and then the other 57.7% is how much we have to pay Metro Van. Okay. So for sewer and drainage, the city's increase is 3%. Representing 42.8% of total expenditures, and the Metro Vancouver increase is 6.1%, representing the remaining portion of expenditures.
What?
Thank you. A quick question, Mr. Chang. The sewer,
Yeah,
I'm wondering about the clarification and making it distinct regarding the North Shore wastewater treatment plant and the cost that will be to city residents, and just whether or not that's going to be broken out someplace where they're actually able to see that rather than having it be inclusive somewhere.
And maybe this, if I may, maybe Councillor Albrecht might know a little bit on that, because my understanding is that already happened last year, and it's only the North Shore sewerage area that's getting an increase, but just if you're okay with that, maybe Councillor Albrecht has more.
Yeah, you know, I'm not like saying an expert in that, but that's my understanding is exactly the way you said right there. That was last year. And then the North Shore is carrying it from this point forward.
So it's, because my understanding was it's a 1%, was it a 1% fee that was spread out across Metro Van, and then I thought there were carrying charges that we as a municipality were going to be carrying over what, 15-year.
That's the North Shore is being amortized over.
So Mr. Flack can talk about how that impacted us last year, but I believe it's not.
Yeah, so maybe I can just add to it.
Yeah.
Shane wasn't here last year when
Thank
we
you.
went through that change. So last year was a large increase in our sewer levy. It was a one-time increase, but you're right. I mean, inside of that ongoing levy each year, there was a portion of that going directly to the North Shore wastewater treatment. The increase this year from Metro Vancouver of the 6.1%.
Yeah.
That is just related to their overall operations and capital infrastructure, not the North Shore wastewater.
Right.
We could definitely, if that was the desire of council, during our open house and things like that, we could try and calculate out which part of our levies relates to the North Shore wastewater treatment plant. That's something council is to pursue.
Okay, so just so that I understand, there is a portion that we are paying through Metro Van, that increase of 6.1%, that is still being allocated directly towards the North Shore.
The not the 6.1%, but the base amount.
Oh, okay.
So the
Right.
base amount does have a prescribed fixed amount that is going towards that project. The 6.1% is above and beyond.
Right, okay. Oh, right.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you.
thank you. So what is the projected surplus for fiscal 2025? Based on the information that we have, we are projecting a surplus of approximately 2 million for fiscal 2025. It's primarily due to licenses and permits revenues, as well as vacancies throughout the year. Just as a side note, prior surpluses were primarily allocated to capital works reserves. Next question relates to parks maintenance. Is the increase in parks maintenance operating capital in nature? So the increase in parks maintenance and operating. In nature, and they pertain to supporting expanded services, enhanced amenities and improved maintenance. Expenses at the consolidated level, do not agree with expenses at the fund level, and this is primarily due to related party transactions that need to be removed. So here we have an example, within the consolidated summary, it shows water expenditures of 5.6. But then if we look at the water fund summary, it shows 6.8, and that's because we had to, eliminate, the related party transactions by removing the interfund application. So, that's that question. City rental properties. So we have. Our city rentals revenue is primarily generated from 4 properties, two residential and 2 commercial. 3 of these properties are managed by property management company. But because the rent is recorded on a net basis, which basically means the gross revenues we collect is offset against all the expenses and shown within the financials as the net revenues from rental properties. So because we record that at the net basis, the estimated increase in net revenues offsets against the estimated increase of expenses, which is why the year-over-year increase is quite modest at $3,000. But we will also be revisiting some of these contracts as well in the new year. Fire suppression, please identify where overtime is noted within the budget. If significant overtime is worked, the 2025 year to date, it's beyond that budget. So overtime is noted within the personnel and benefits category. But vacancies and unscheduled time off, such as sick leave and WCA, will basically offset against the overtime charge. So depending on the vacancies throughout the year and when the positions are filled, sometimes the overtime may not be that apparent within these line items.
Councilor.
Yeah, thank you. Just a quick clarifying question, the note there that says overtime is noted within personal and benefits. And then any vacancies will offset against the overtime charge to that account. Is that a practice straight across the board for all departments?
That's correct.
So the surplus at the end of the year that's noted is more about larger vacancies, or what sort of vacancies would those be that get allocated towards surplus at the end?
Out of the $2 million surplus that we have, approximately 500,000 is related to vacancies throughout the year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Councilor Mack.
Thank you for your worship. I was just curious, in terms of sick time, I know, like, I'm not 100% confident in the collective agreement and all the terms of the collective agreement, but would there not be some coverage for sick time? And it says unscheduled time off, so potentially maybe this an uncovered extended leave. Because I'm just curious, it seems like sick time would generally be something that the union staff would be compensated for in some regard. So as with the offsetting, I think it would be, I would perceive that as being in addition to the expense of overtime.
This would be, so the sick time here would refer to the extended sick time. I think the short is.
So maybe Ms. Zeller can talk about short-term and long-term disabilities.
Yes, thank you for the mayor. So we do, in the collective agreement, they do have paid sick time. And that would depend, they can start to use that depending on how much they have for sick time. So, and it's not, we don't have a short-term disability versus long-term disability. So it is paid sick time.
Mr. Black.
If I just add one thing to it, so
Yep.
when we have any employee through any department in the city, we go off on work safe benefits or long-term disability. Those are 100% picked up either by work safe or a long-term disability insurance provider. So at that point, we stop incurring costs for that. What we do incur costs for is when we start backfilling, so particularly in the fire department, a certain rescue crews on shift, we'll pull them in. So what happens though is there's the base, regular wages are there to cover sort of the straight time amount, then the extra half time on top of that becomes.
Just as a final clarification, that would be for more of like a long-term leave as opposed to like just being sick for this. Thank you.
Service level enhancements, so this particular slide is really just a summary of all of the SLEs that were presented previously. Before we jump into SLE related questions. But one of the questions has to do with the use of contractors and consultants. What reason does the city use contractors or consultants instead of employees? So it really comes down to a handful of criterias or purposes when it comes to the use of consultants, and some of the things that are looked at and considered is basically like the nature of the work, the expertise or the specialization of the work required, or the duration of the work, whether it's permanent versus temporary, right? So some examples of the use of consultants and contractors would basically be on like engineering projects, where there's a high level of specialization for each of the different areas that are involved, as well as IT projects, right? Like when there's any sort of infrastructure upgrades, system implementations, sometimes we will use consultants to kind of help us with some of those upgrades. Does the city manager review overtime regularly? Does management hire employees if it would be more cost effective to do so? Yes, so we do review overtime on a regular basis. And if criteria are satisfied, the ones that were listed in the previous slide, and it's determined to be cost effective, then the management will propose service level enhancements and request for a position to be filled. And an example of this would basically be the hiring of the application systems network specialist in IT, which resulted in a reduction in some of the contracted services within IT services. What are the cost savings for each SLE requests? It's actually for certain types of requests, it's actually quite difficult to come up with cost savings versus some other types of requests, but for I guess for certain roles, it's primarily like a risk-based approach where we want to minimize potential risks down the road, where we want to minimize potential future liabilities or expenditures that may arise if we don't take extra due diligence for certain practices here at the city, right? So, for example, a procurement manager might practice extra due diligence for certain things that we may not think about when we're going through the whole competitive bid process. A project manager or a business analyst might take extra due diligence and might consider other areas such as IT governance and all that stuff when implementing system implementations, things that we may not think about if we're handling these projects off the side of our desk, right? So there's certain scenarios where it's difficult to come up with the cost savings because some of these benefits we can't really quantify and apply a dollar value. which is why for some of these roles, or the majority of the service level enhancement roles that we've requested, I think it's more of a preventative measure and to basically and to increase the service levels across certain areas as well. Please confirm that the new city officers will cost $160,000 each year for full year of employment. So we have confirmed with the division that the proposed $160,000 each includes the allotment for the estimated wage increments. For facility supervisor, questions were which buildings and facilities would the facility supervisor be responsible for? So this is something that we are still kind of assessing what the overall scope will be. But to give mayor and council a idea of potential scope, we have 4 city-owned public facilities that this particular role would oversee. City-owned and operated facilities, there's 6 of them. City-owned but managed by a property manager, there's 3 facilities, and then city-owned property with private-owned buildings on top of the city land, there's 7 properties. And on top of this, there's also public facilities within like the city's parks and all that kind of stuff that could potentially fall under this particular role as well too. But that has yet to be determined. For the engineering clerical SLE, one of the follow-up items were how does this relate to the FTE shown under major municipal roads and traffic services. So this particular ask is a net new addition. So it's not reflected in the accounts within those areas. So for the infrastructure levy service level enhancement, what was the infrastructure gap? And how much do we need to fund annually to ensure that we are sufficiently funding our city's infrastructure reserves? So based on the data that we have in our system, the current estimated replacement value of all of our city assets is roughly around $1.24 billion. The current capital reserve allocation we have is around 14 million. Best practice annual replacement value amortization should be around 26 million. So we're roughly around $12 million short every year. So if we do ask for similar increases every year, roughly around 400,000, it can take 24 to 25 years to get to where we need to be. But yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and then for your worship, I'm just curious, to make up the shortfall of 12 million, what would that roughly equate to in terms of tax increase in today's dollars?
Be about a 24% increase because we asked for 1 million, or the increase that we asked for this year, I think is a 1% increase. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so this particular slide doesn't factor in potential grant funding that we could potentially apply for. And it only takes into account the existing assets that we have on the pool extension SLE. We were asked to provide some numbers for the fall extension. So within this table, you're gonna see, we try to summarize by the number of classes offered, number of classes canceled, number of registrants, the spots not filled and the fill rates and all that kind of stuff. And then we also have the pool drop-in numbers as well. We try to show the pool drop-in for the entire period as well as per day. And we also have family drop-in, which could potentially represent up to 2 adults and the kids and the children residing within that household. So as you can see, the busiest times is the summertime. But they are relatively busy in the spring and the fall with the limited hours as well.
I do think there's a
There's a
typo.
typo there.
The spot's not filled, it's not 440. I don't recall what it was for the fall,
No, it's not.
but I think we did
440.
offer 122 classes and we canceled 21 of them due to staffing, lack of staffing. But I don't recall what the spot's not filled.
I think the spot's not filled
We're going backwards.
probably around like 2%, so like around 60 something, 66, 67. It's around 16%.
Yeah, so it's the fill rate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the proposal for the spring, if we open on April 13, 2026, we could potentially offer up to 130 classes.
Also, like,
Thank you. Would now be an appropriate time to talk about the proposal on the pool extension, or is there another time?
I can just a general, about it.
Well,
Yes, you can ask that
I
now.
guess my general question is, I see a much greater value to the spring. Not so much the fall, and if we're kind of weighing some things out, I would, consider investing with to the spring session and maybe next the fall session. I'd be curious to know how that would look and what support for that would be like.
So we're not debating the merits of the proposals today, but you can get information on what it would look like if you remove the fall session. I'm sure for the next, because you have some opportunity for additional feedback. Right. Guys, this one, so.
Yeah, we could definitely look at that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, Councilor William.
I just clarification of this from staff, the spring, May 9th to June 29th, that regularly runs those months, or this was an exception.
So
That's regularly.
Yeah,
so
that's
the-
regular.
Yeah, so May to June is
That's
regular,
always good.
summer is regular, fall is what we introduced this year.
Oh, that's, and so, just double checking, so the proposal would be even earlier than that spring. It would be.
Yes.
Yes, it's, great, thank you.
Councilor.
Thank you. Through the mayor, just as a little bit of back, just in looking at the actual periods, it does seem to be, like, I don't wanna say it's directly proportional. This was the first year, obviously, for September 1st to 28th. But if you look at like May and June is 2 months, I guess it's July, August during the summer months is proportionately higher, but it's the summer and it's an outdoor pool, so I think that's probably not shocking. So it might be maybe a little bit more helpful to have like per month breakdown or something, like just maybe, or just highlight the fact that the actual time periods aren't equivalent. I appreciate it.
There you are. One is 2 month period, one's a 3 month period, and one's a 1 month period.
Yeah.
But I guess for clarity too, and maybe Ms. Hilton can explain, that is how you register. Do registrations as well, is that correct?
Through the mayor, yes, that is correct. And I think the telling feature here is our fill rate, so we're still getting good fill rate in the fall. It was actually, we could have had more classes, but we didn't have the staff to support it, so we didn't have to cancel it. So there was still a need for that.
Councillor Zelina.
I guess just a follow-up question, Steph, would you characterize it as a success then in terms of swimming lessons being offered to the Langley City residents? I mean, I'm just looking at the drop-ins are a drastic decrease, but this was primarily put on with the purpose of making swimming lessons more attainable for the residents of Langley City. So would you say it was a success in that regard?
Through the mayor, yes, lessons definitely was what the need was in the community. Takeaway learnings, we would offer more lake swimming, earlier in the evening after lessons rather than just public swims. We were both people in, and potentially having some aquafit classes if we get distracted.
Thank you. Wonderful.
Right, so the next set of questions and follow-ups relate to funding sources. Please provide a breakdown of the 8.94 million general fund transfer and 7.74 million other contributions. So I've provided a breakdown here in this particular table, and I've also provided the revised estimated reserve balance as of the end of this year. So as you can see, we are predicting $26 million within our reserve balance at the end of this year. Tax and utility contributions for water and for sewer, we have allocated $1 million each. General operating transfer is 2.914 million. And the difference between the 8.9 and the 2.9, I've actually broken down to show separately down below under other contributions, where it basically shows future sales proceeds, 6 million. And then I've also broken down the other contributions to show it by gaming proceeds of 6.7 million and interest proceeds of roughly around 800,000. And then finally, the other external contributions of 667,000. The reserve expenditures remain the same, but the ending balance is estimated to be roughly around 24.7 billion. There was a question on unallocated reserves. So what is the balance of the unallocated reserves for the 2026 budget? So the unallocated reserves is really like our insurance policy. So we try not to dip into it if we can, but it really is so based on the numbers that we have, and because we are still in fiscal 2025, the unallocated reserve is estimated to be roughly around 8.5 million, which can be broken down between the operating surplus of 3.3 million and the tax rate stabilization reserve of 5.2. So the operating surplus that I've shown in this particular slide is actually as of December 31st, 2024. And then the tax rate stabilization is our projected balance as of December 31st, 2026. So once we get through fiscal 2025, then we'll be able to provide a more accurate estimation of what the unallocated reserves would be for fiscal 2026. As a side note, it's best practice that the unallocated reserve should be roughly around 30% of operating expenses. So if we factor that in, 30% of the $54.6 million operating expenses, we're looking at a balance of roughly around 16.4 million that we probably should have in the unallocated reserve accounts, I guess. So right now, with 8.5 million that we're projecting, that represents about 15.6% of operating expenses.
Councillor Mack.
Thank you, for your worship, for the 7.9 million that we're in a deficit of, do you mind communicating what that would equate to in terms of tax percentage to bring the levy to that?
To bring it up to,
What would be, I guess, like,
to bring it up to 30%.
reserves would be, it wouldn't necessarily be a regular levy, like how would we basically generate that revenue? What's the plan to get us up to fill the shortfall of like 9 million?
Yeah, it would be the what would be? So I have a slide a bit further down that kind of breaks down for every $1 million increase what the tax rate increase would be. And so I think for $1 million it represents like a 0.18. Yes.
And then just as a final follow-up, for these like for this reserve account, like there's the infrastructure levy, which obviously we need to be generating more because there's consistent expenses, but I guess part of my question is to get up this level. Because I'm not certain or clear whether or not this would have to be directly a like one-time tax increase levy to then year over year be fulfilling this value. I think it would be, what's our strategy to get up to that level? Would we have to increase taxes a certain percentage in order to achieve that? But I think once the base was accrued, it would be accrued, if that makes sense. So I guess what's our strategy, and would it be incrementally saving towards getting to that point, which would be X number of years at this percentage tax increase levy? What's the strategy? I know it's kind of an on the fly question that just came up when I saw it.
Yeah, so to replenish this, like what Mr. Flack mentioned, would be pretty similar to how we need to replenish the infrastructure reserve. In terms of strategy, it could be something that we take away and bring back to the council on a potential strategy to kind of to achieve the 30% allocated reserve target. So that's something we would.
Thank you.
The councilor, right?
Thank you, through the mayor. Mr. Chang, just a quick question, the tax stabilization rate. Or the tax rate stabilization reserve fund. It's 5.2 million estimated at the end of 2026. But we have been making contributions through to that quite substantially over the last 4 years. You know, 600,000 to $1 million every year. That's been increasing. That comes primarily through surplus at the end of the year. Is that correct?
That's correct. And there's also some interest earned as well. That
Right.
Allocate to that account.
Yeah, right now it's about 121 or I think or 140 or something.
Yeah.
So the surpluses that we've been experiencing that we've contributed to the stabilization reserve fund, that comes primarily then through savings incurred through capital projects, but primarily would you say based on kind of our shortfall in terms of staffing and shortages there? Or is a lot of that shortfall being rolled over into the tax stabilization? Is that how it's occurred?
Also, Mr. Black has the answer.
Yeah, maybe just some history about the tax stabilization reserve in general as well.
Yeah.
So we originally established that reserve account years ago. When we were looking at our operating budget and trying to squeeze and reduce our taxes. So at the time, one thing we did, we reduced the operating budget for snow removal, for instance. So because snow removal can really depend on the weather dependent. So what we said is at the time, we took some of our surplus and designated that tax rate stabilization. We purposely reduced the snow removal budget. But we said, if we need the money, it's there at the end of the day. When the snow falls, we need to react to it, it's in that reserve.
Yeah.
We also collected money for things, timing differences, so for instance, when hirings throughout the year and got delayed, or whether it was debt servicing. So for instance, when we go to the market to ask for debt, we have to demonstrate to the province that we have the full budget and tax revenues in place to support that debt. But in some cases, depending on project plans, we may get the approval for that debt, say in 2024, and actually not physically borrow that money. So in the meantime, we have collected extra tax dollars for interest and principal payments that we have. We've designated those in tax rate stabilization. The other surplus, the general surplus funds that you talked about, so throughout the year, if our building permit revenue is high, like in 2025, or we have some unexpected vacancies in an area. A couple years ago, Scott was at the helm in place of 3 fire chiefs, he was doing it by himself, we had a surplus from that money in particular. When we have those, we generally put the capital works reserve. Capital works reserve is a flexible pot that we can pull on for most of our capital programs. We do purposely keep this tax rate stabilization off to the side, just so it's there, just in case future. Like Mr. Chang said, it's kind of an insurance policy. 30% is a total best practice. I think if you went to most municipalities, in BC, probably in Canada, no one's hitting that target. It's an aspirational target. It is best practice. I think in as industry, you would see companies very aware of those type of reserve levels, make sure that they're. So, over time, we would want to probably build up. One way you could build that up is we could delay capital projects, but I think we'd have to be cautious that we're delaying some optional capital projects versus infrastructure replacements. If we delay infrastructure replacements, probably our repair and maintenance costs for it. So get a bit of a balance again.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I totally appreciate the fact that it's a balancing act and it's a good practice for us to be doing. I think the other balancing act is certainly, the challenge that you find back in terms of fulfilling all of those staff positions. And that has been the ongoing kind of challenge year over year. There's about a 7% kind of shortfall that way in terms of staffing that we're unable to fill. And I appreciate that it's good practice to put that into the capital, works reserve. And yet at the same time, I'm cognizant that, we're presenting, the challenge of staffing costs that property tax will pay for, but that won't be fully realized within the year. And so, for me, this underscores the importance of, making sure that we support kind of your efforts in terms of getting people hired. So that, I feel better about kind of that as a cost that people aren't paying for, that they're not actually realizing it as a community. So, thank you. Yeah.
Thanks. I guess it's a question for me. You mentioned it, Mr. Black. The 30% is aspirational, and I think probably the allocating a percentage each year is also probably pretty aspirational. Is it easy to get information on sort of where other municipalities are in Metro Vancouver on this?
It's difficult. I know, especially probably for us, that's at all levels down, local, provincial, and federal as well. We all have that deficit on municipality out there that's. And we're used to point to Burnaby, for instance, they have huge reserves, billions of dollars. Those are gone as they haven't tackled some large capital projects. So, we as local governments, we heavily rely on grant funding and things like that to fill the gaps. Mr. Chang referenced about $1.2 billion of tangible capital assets. As I was sitting here listening to that, in the back of my head, I thought assets like the 204 Street overpass. that we didn't pay for it. You know, we paid a very small portion of that project, but that's now included in that 1.2 billion that's replaced in the future, so. You know, those are some opportunities if we are looking at meter infrastructure that have regional benefits, we've been looking for funding for those. You're right, it's difficult to compare municipalities across. No one out there, I haven't seen too many municipalities with very specific numbers yet. This is our infrastructure deficit, this is how we're gonna tackle it. At this point, I think a lot of municipalities are just trying to identify that 1.2 billion, fine tune it and figure out a game plan going forward, how we're gonna do that. Slowly been doing that. We know we have the infrastructure deficit. That's why over the last 10 years now, we've been slowly incrementing our infrastructure levy on our property taxes, and those are incrementally to each other. So even if we just do $200,000 a year increase, you know, year 2, we're getting 400,000, year 3, we're getting 600,000. So that's why it's important to have some of those increases. And the city's been successful at doing that. But yes, I realistically in the next 20 years, are we going to be able to tackle our infrastructure deficit and discuss practice as far as unallocated reserves? Probably not. But I think if we take steps towards that, at least we're going in the right direction.
Yeah, so just a follow-up, you wouldn't expect a municipality would have, say, hey, we're gonna do a 30% taxing. That most would be, well, I would say, my observation is most municipalities don't do much, but some of them do things like we're doing, so.
Yeah, there's slow increases and there's some municipalities that haven't done that. Give you the example of Prince Rupert, they didn't have reserves to support their water infrastructure. They got to a breaking point when the province levy had to help them out and repair that structure. So I think we're heading in the right direction, but yeah, it's not something that we would achieve short term by one infrastructure levy. We'll just have to work towards a solution. All right, thank you.
Casino reserves, how does casino reserves plus interest be listed as repayment to reserves, but also your funding source for capital items? So here I just have the continuity schedule for fiscal 2026. So as you can see, the gaming proceeds is really just it's a flow through reserve account. So every year we contribute to it, but then every year we also draw on it to cover off some of the capital operating as well. Debt ceiling, what is the debt ceiling for this particular budget? As previously presented, the max annual debt servicing is 25%, which is equivalent to 25% of the annual revenue, so it's equivalent to 19 million. Best practice is to try to achieve the 20% of annual revenues, which is in this particular case to be 15 million. This is the debt servicing that we try to aim for here at the city as well. So if we factor that in, the borrowing capacity at 20%, debt servicing is roughly around $190 million. Currently we have around $22 million in debt. So this would basically reduce that borrowing capacity down to 168 million. Any questions on the reserve side before jumping to the capital? Okay, so for the capital improvement plan, this is just a summary again of the allocations for the proposed 2026 projects by department. We have we're proposing $28.8 million in capital projects for 2026. This basically shows the funding sources for all the capital projects. And so as you can see, majority of it is coming from our statutory reserves, with a good chunk coming from our casino proceeds as well. Unfunded projects. So one of the questions is which projects has been identified but are currently unfunded. Currently, we don't have any unfunded projects within our capital plan. total value of the projects, based on the capital plan summary is, roughly around 223 million. Over the course of the next 10 years. But as we hire an asset management resource, and as we continuously improve the city's asset management processes, it's gonna eventually change.
Yes, Counselor.
Your worship, is this in response to my question? I don't know if this is another council member's question, but.
Yeah, this is it actually.
Okay, so just to clarify, it specifically wasn't unfunded capital projects, within the capital plan. It was unfunded capital projects within the Invest Langley City strategy. So whether that be the
yeah.
Performing Arts and Cultural Center, the indoor aquatic facility, our infrastructure deficit, and I believe the operations center could potentially be part of that. Either way, what is I mean, I know that one's funded in this plan. As it's proposed, but that's the number that I was looking for. I believe that it was 12.5 million as of last budget. If you take away the operations center, which was 30. I don't know if those.
Yeah,
Well, I think Mr. Chang.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. 2,000 maps. Certainly, we have a provision in 2026 budget from the operations center, so that number is sort of concrete. With respect to the Arts and Cultural Center, we do have a number that was prepared to us probably about 4 or 5 years ago, as council may recall. Obviously, the construction industry has changed since that time, so moving forward, we need to get an updated number, based on the current concept plan that we have. And we're currently going through the feasibility study for the aquatic center to define the scope. And once we have that, then we will know what kind of costs would be for that project. So, even though we're moving forward, the Invest Langley City plan, there's still some work for us ahead to define and determine the approximate costs of those projects. So once we have that information, we're going to present it to council, and then we have a further discussion with council at that time.
Yeah, thank you through as a follow-up. So then, prior to us approving Invest Langley City or to proceed with Invest Langley City, like my understanding as a member of council, so it's very important that when we're asking residents if they would like a facility to have the cost associated. I know that last year's budget, we did have speculative numbers that were promoted publicly. So if those numbers have proceeded to, I guess, change, or if those are probably not going to be achievable, and there's going to be a subsequent increase. I think the ultimate point in getting at is that funding down is hard, and then further, residents would have to discern what they may or may not want to put that asking to do it. So I guess just how is this all coming together if we don't have numbers, but we're going to be going to the public, but we can actually communicate to them what the cost and tax impacts would be.
Yeah, through the mayor to council map. Yeah, that's why we have a capital project for phase 2 on the Invest Langley City plan. And we're working diligently on finalizing the feasibility study for the body center. The plans to have that wrapped up by February. And we will also at the same time firm up on the Arts and Cultural Center plan process. So by the time we do fully engage the community, we will have those numbers for.
Yes, please go ahead.
This is a final follow-up. So is this looking like the investment is going to go live right before the election or during the election?
I mean, my understanding is of council as it was, but there may be opposite questions.
Yeah, that's
I would
correct.
assume so.
Yeah, through the mayor to council map, we're going through the process of defining the scope, educational and information campaign, so that we can educate and inform the public of what the Invest Langley City plan is about, what projects are included in the plan, what the cost implication would be to the taxpayer of the city. And like the mayor said, we are considering potentially having a opinion question in as part of the municipal election for fall 2026.
Perfect.
So this is a summary of the general government capital requests for 2026. So the next the next few slides actually covers off the question that came in for Invest Langley City. What is the total cost of all projects promoted under this particular initiative? What funding sources do we have to deliver these projects? What would the debt servicing cost be to deliver projects promoted under this particular initiative? A few more questions. What would be the approximate tax impact of ongoing operation of the facilities promoted within this initiative? This could be revenue streams, staffing costs, facilities maintenance, debt servicing. And how does this combine with the 10-year capital improvement plan summary? So basically, this is an initiative to better understand the priorities and the willingness to support new investments within Langley City, including the various funding options and I guess the public perception of the funding options as well. So currently, because we are quite early on for this particular initiative, it's actually quite difficult to kind of assess the overall tax impact from a one-time cost to ongoing operations. It's in terms of funding options, it's kind of difficult without fully understanding the scope of work and the total cost and all that kind of stuff as well too. So we can't really include it in the 10-year CIP summary just yet, right? Once we have all that information, once the numbers are all concrete and all that kind of stuff, then we can start playing with these numbers, right? Debt servicing costs, just from a really high level, for every $1 million borrowed, there's going to be a tax impact of roughly around 0.18%. And this is assuming repayment at 4% over 20 years. And for some of these initiatives, in terms of funding options, there's always the opportunity to pursue grant funding and all that kind of stuff from as well too, depending on projects and all that. So that would potentially impact the tax base as well. So the next question related to the Turnout gear. How much of the gear currently used by Langley City contains PFAS? Will the $30,000 budget allocation reduce the usage of PFAS gear, and what assurance will there be that this budget will be used to purchase non-PFAS gear? So currently here at Langley, all of our turnout gear contains PFAS. The request for this particular request is to purchase coveralls for non-structural situations to reduce the use of existing turnout gear. The department is exploring options for turnout gear and factoring in new information when it becomes available. And in the future, we can definitely move towards the commitment of purchasing PFAS-free gear, but will also require the commitment to support any increases as a result of this initiative.
Just a clarity question, this is for non-PFAS here, the $30,000.
Sure, happy to speak to that.
Yes,
To the mayor, the $30,000 that I was requesting is to come up with an alternative process, that's to buy the coveralls, which would work as an interim factor to be able to get the firefighters out of the PFAS gear.
yeah, so the $30,000 is to purchase equipment
Coveralls.
with no PFAS in it.
That's correct, but it's coveralls as opposed to turnout.
I get that.
Oh.
Perfect.
Questions? Okay. Engineering. So again, just to summarize, this is all the engineering projects proposed for fiscal 2026. Does this budget include paving for 205 A Street between 205 B Street and 48th Avenue? No, it does not. However, engineering expects to have results from the pavement management strategy by the end of this year. Currently, if we're factoring in some unspent allocations for fiscal 2025 and the 2026 ask is roughly around $600,000. The department can kind of work with, depending on the results of the pavement management strategy. Has the repaving for 46th Avenue between 204 8th Street and 205 Street been completed? Yes, it was completed last week. How old is the F-550 that the department plans on replacing? 10 years old. Pedestrian facilities, how will the locations for these upgrades be determined? It'll be determined based on the request for services or feedback. So for road rehab, so the road rehab budgets for 2025 or for 2024 was 650, 2025 was 800, with a forecast of 1.5 million for 2026. However, for 2026, the road rehab for MRN is 0, but for LRN it's 226,000. What's the reasoning behind this? So we still have, as previously mentioned, we still have 375,000 unspent from 2025, and we are still waiting for the pavement management strategy to be released or to be completed by the end of this year. And due to some staff vacancies resulting in fewer projects delivered, the department feels this the 226 is relatively reasonable for what could be completed. Sense. Any questions? Logan Avenue, are other items included within the scope of this particular project, or is there like a larger contingency? Because the budget allocation does seem to be a little bit higher side. So the department is still waiting to confirm road conditions, but there is anticipation that the road base will need to be replaced in addition to the pavement, which is why that's been factored into this particular budget allocation request. Langley bypass intersection upgrades. The budget allocation ask is 4.1 million. How are projects selected for grant applications? Even though the project is largely funded through grants, a portion is still funded by the city. So these projects are selected based on recommendations within the transportation plans, crash data, based on feedback from the residents, etc. Funding opportunities are based on criteria set out by the funding partners. For this particular project, it goes back to 2023. And based on that, we've also received several sources of funding in each year since 2023, such as the bicycle infrastructure capital cost share grant, the walking infrastructure to transit, and the MRN grant. So in total, grant funding is roughly around, or is going to cover off 2.9 million of the 4.1 million, and then the rest is going to be funded by the city. But for this particular project, it does go back a couple of years. So I guess engineering feels like we should just try to finish it off before revisiting other projects. Yeah.
So before we get to Councilor Mac, I believe there's actually a requirement to finish this up as well. From translation.
Through the chair, yes, Mr. Chang's indicated it's a multi-year grant program. And the expiry of the first part of that grant, that's the reason it's being brought forward. It's each time a grant is given, it has a time limit money has to be spent, and the first day is probably expires.
Perfect, Councilman.
Yeah, just to clarify, the mayor's question, we don't have to proceed with this, but if we don't proceed with it, we have to give the grant money back. We don't give the grant money unless we actually proceed with this project specifically, correct?
To the chair, Councilor Mack, that's correct.
And a follow-up for this project is funded through DCCs, which are specifically allocated projects, correct?
I believe correct.
It's believe so. Thank you.
And then I guess as a follow-up, is this specific project mandated to the DCC program? Or if this one was removed, could another program not be subsequently inserted?
To the chair, to Councilor Mack, this has been identified in the Transport 2050 program. For construction. And it was identified as as mentioned for intersection improvements, which are said through as well as road. So therefore it was included in the DCC program. This grant funding is specific to this particular project, so we couldn't then substitute another project and then transfer this funding over. This funding is specifically for this project.
I guess just as a final clarification, and we're in the committee of the whole, so I don't need to say through the mayor.
You do need to be acknowledged by the mayor at all times.
Acknowledged by.
And then so anytime you speak, you need to be acknowledged to be able to speak through the mayor at all times.
I just wanted to clarify.
No worries.
Through worship, just to clarify though, the grant portion is associated with this project. However, if we decided not to proceed with E20, we gave the grant, we did not decide to actually take the grant, or we gave back logistics associated, our remaining portionate share of $1.2 million could be allocated to something else within our DCC program.
To the chair, to Councilor Mack, I defer to my financial colleagues for confirmation of this, but the DCC bylaw lays out specific projects. The money is not just collected for one project, it's collected within all the projects that are there, so it could be reassigned. In terms of the grant funding, I would suggest that obviously the granting agencies, if we were to return the money unspent, it would impact our effectiveness in receiving future grants.
And the final question that I had before the popcorn questions came up, was just that for the second point, funding opportunities based on criteria set by funders. Part of the question is that I believe there's 5 criteria with TransLink, and we have an opportunity to apply for the different, I guess, funding opportunities, but I do note that most often it seems like we apply for active transportation funding, which is great, but I just felt as a member of council that I didn't actually have, like, in terms of the process, it's not overly transparent in terms of getting a little bit of insight into what's going to come to us. It feels like a 3/4 baked pie by the time it comes to us in the budget, so we have this kind of awkward dynamic where we look at, okay, well, we're kind of almost stuck in some regard, like foot in the door to approve this E20, because we don't want to have consequences, of course, of, frustrating funding partners, but it does feel like it's almost, it's presented. So I guess basically just discussions about the process, finding out about the different funding opportunities, and then how maybe council can be involved in the selection process, so that by the time it got to us, we were expecting it.
To the chair, to Councilor Mack, as has been, Chang mentioned, this was a project that has multi-year, so council would first see this 2022-23. And at that time, it was acknowledged that it would be a multi-year program to get to secure the funding. Typically, in terms of grant funding, there are monies that come to us that are allocated because of the amount of regional roads that we have within our city, but there's also monies that are available that are competitive in nature. So, and they are toward active transportation. That's the focus of transit. So that's where the the availability of grant funding is more prevalent.
Thank you. And just a follow-up for clarification, I'll get to Councillor Wallace. The local government funding programs are available on the TransLink website. I believe they've circulated it to us as well. On those programs. And you're right, there's programs we get as a base funding. And there's programs that we apply for and specifically kind of focus on active. Yeah, and then council, just for clarity, is approved this for 2 years in a row, so I'm assuming we've had a really good opportunity over the last 2 years to go through this. The councillor.
I think I'm okay through the mayor. I'm okay because, the bullet, made the points that I was going to ask in regards to when we, garnered that funding and the piece around of active transportation, and that I guess the importance is of, you know, I feel very fortunate that we can, garner a grant like this to be able to do, connectivity. Because I find oftentimes when it comes to active transportation, it really stops, right? We get it and then it stops. So this is like, I feel like it's a benefit to the city and continuing our active transportation network. So, thank you for your points.
And maybe what we can do is circulate the grant information from TransLink to council. I think that might be good.
So the next question pertains to Great Crescent upgrades. So the question is, the north side of Great Crescent from 203rd Street to 205 Street has a sidewalk, while the south side does not. 203rd Street to HD Stafford has newer paving compared to the rest of the Great Crescent. Did we consider applying for TransLink funding for this project to build out a more substantial MUP that extends 2 blocks, and the budget allocation seems to be a bit on the high side as well. So the response that we have is this section was flagged as high priority to connect the pedestrian and bicycle facilities to HD Stafford. Other sections of Great Crescent between 200th Street and 208th Street is it's medium priority. The work here doesn't qualify for any TransLink funding. The MUP has traversed deep ravine, which could be quite costly as well too, which is why we requested for a higher budget allocation. The current design is being finalized right now. So once we have the final design for the work that needs to be done, then we can confirm the costs at that particular time. Operations Center, a few questions here is, why is the design and construction combined as one item? Can these be separated into 2 separate capital items? What capital items were deferred to accommodate this particular project? So we actually have an existing architectural design and planning budget of roughly around 380,000. So this particular budget allocation allows the city to start construction as soon as possible and deliver faster solution, faster turnaround time. And we haven't really deferred any capital projects as a result of this. Everything that engineering wanted to do for 2026 has already been captured within the 2026 plan.
Yes, Councilor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do know that in the 2025 speculative, I don't like what's outlined for 2026. There are several items that have been removed. So like with examples or but there are some examples that it's getting from sort of but and then also some variations. I know asset management implementation went from 20,000 up to 100,000. And there are items that have been removed from 2026, so I guess, how does that reconcile with the perspective that nothing is being deferred, and what is the process to speculate what's gonna be in a future year in the existing year compared to the normal flux and flow that happens when the year comes to fruition, I guess?
Maybe that's a Mr. Pollock question on how we get through the again, from long one to actually what you need. How does that look?
Yeah, I think through the chair, it's every time that a project is identified, there is a budget attached. That budget is can be, depending on the uncertainty around the project, that project can be quite conservative, that the estimate can be quite conservative. Really, as we then move into the securing a consultant, that allows us to tie down a little bit more of the cost. Then when the design is complete, we would have an engineer's estimate, which would hopefully reflect more accurately the cost. So through the process of a capital project, you know, the budget is the number that's best attributed to that specific project. It may well refine over a period of time. And I think that in terms of projects being deferred, every year we're always trying to evaluate how best to move projects forward. And typically they will, if we have to, some may move backward in the financial plan without being removed. They move back a year or two. The challenge is also that projects are often funded from multiple sources. So moving one back, it's not a simple case of replacing one with another. We have to look at the available amounts every year and balance the budget that way. So it is a process, and in my experience, it's a process that we look at each year and as we come to it, and then make evaluations as to whether a project maybe gets moved back a year or more in order for a project to proceed based on what levels are available.
So here we have a summary of all the parks projects. So one of the questions is, for this incremental park upgrade, will the scope of this project include pathway improvements, which is currently uneven and filled with divots and ruts? Access point at 201 A Street and 50 Avenue is inaccessible. One path is very steep, and the other you need to traverse over a curb, which is followed by crack pavement there. So the trail maintenance is actually is handled under the operating budget. But for this particular capital item, so the Parks Master Plan, which addresses trails and trail accessibility, has been included in the 2026 work plan for the department to review. So based on the review, then they're going to be able to assess and determine what the scope of prioritization this particular
Maybe, sorry, yeah, go ahead. Just for clarity, that's a future plan. I thought this was years.
This is a future.
Just for checking. Okay, that's good.
And just through the chair, like the parks recreation plan was put by council in 2023. Does speak to trails, and there are, I think, just around 17 kilometers of trails in the city. There's actually four classifications, and both of those trails are those trails that are designated as being fully accessible. There's the asphalt trail. So I think from a historical perspective, there are locations where a trail may have been identified as an accessible trail without necessarily being in accordance with the current standards. So that's what we're going to be looking at next year, is to look at the entire trail network, the various classifications, And then what should be market accessible, what modifications, if any, have to be made? And then looking at the other trails as well, to make sure that they're appropriately signed. And that the appropriate accessibility sign is.
Here we have the sewer summary.
I'm sorry, just a quick question through the mayor. I was looking at the city park upgrades and capital improvement plan. And just wanted clarification, the 2026 allocation is 1250. And then there's a further allocation in 2029, that's 1.377 in 2029. And I understand that in City Park, we're looking at a couple things in the scope of that project. Washroom buildings and the replacement of the batting cage. And there's the design in 26 and construction in 27 is kind of what the note says. So I'm unclear as to what the 2029 amount is for.
That's a Mr. Paula question.
Through the chair, I haven't got that particular item, I could source it out if desired, but I think the council will certainly have an opportunity to revisit this plan here. So typically, whenever we're getting out 4 to 5 years to the program, the projects are assigned there, and that will be reflective out of the master plan going through. But it will at that time sort of be reevaluated in the sort of 27, 28,
Okay.
29.
All right, I do understand it's a few years out. I just wanted to get clarity because I got the 26, 27 connection, but I just wanted to be clear the 2025, but I can be patient.
And maybe we can, because this was some time ago, we did the city park master, city park plan. Maybe we could share a link again, because I know that must have been like, it was a while ago when we did that.
It was, yeah. Chair to Mr. Whitehead. I think in the package, it does have a brief piece of washroom building. I think you mentioned washroom building, batting cage in possession, and again, so that would be coming out of the parks plan as well as the city park.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Perfect.
One of the last questions that we got for culvert replacements. Which culverts has been identified for replacement as per the inspection reports? This is basically based on the 2022 culvert inspection report. But engineering will continue to review priorities for 2026. So this $300,000 right now is a placeholder for upcoming repairs.
Yes, Councilor.
Thank you, through your worship, but specifically, it's that's a placeholder to address items that are high priority or the highest priority, presumably in the 2022 culvert inspection report.
To the chair, to Mr. Mike, there's about 40 culverts that we have in the city, and they were identified or reviewed in 2022. So what staff will typically do is there's a couple of candidate projects that I've looked at, which is Muscle Creek and also Langley Creek. But really, we'll have staff walk those and see which are the most pressing ones and advance those forward. But there's up to the inspection report lists the recommended upgrades for every culvert throughout the city. What is required varies, but also it's a sort of sometimes it can worsen quickly. So we just want to do an inspection rather than being prescriptive every year to have what we think is a reasonable allocation. And and then we'll do an inspection, proceed with the work that we have been started.
If I could make a recommendation then, I would like to move that the 2022 culvert inspection report be released to council.
But is that a confidential report?
It's part of the chair, it's one of, it's a report similar to some others. It wouldn't be a sort of a readily releasable document, but it's part of our asset, documentation.
Councillor Wallace.
So in saying that, in the recommendation to release it to council, would there be a stipulation noted that it was to stay within council, or?
To the chair, it could be interpreted,
So Mr. Conlon may have some better information.
Yeah, I think what would be best for council is for staff to have a look at the report to ensure that there's no confidentiality information in there. And if there are, we can then, section those off and release it to the council and the public. But I think what we'll do is we'll have a look at it. Just make sure that we're not missing any potential liability or confidential information from the report that may harm the.
Yeah, and then just for clarification, we're not debating anything right now, but Councillor.
Yeah, if I do fine tune the wording of the recommendations, I think that before any action or anything like that is required, I think that my perception is that this would be released in this would be a closed document. That's my general perception, so I think it's just to release to council unredacted. And then from there, we could have a discussion about releasing it publicly, but that's not really my concern. My concern is just more trying to figure out what's the state of our assets. And as council is tasked with allocating funding and deciding those are for what, yeah. I just would like that information as a council.
That's clear.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that brings us to the end of this presentation. Next steps. We anticipate the bylaw introduction of this reading to be on November 17th. And the financial open house week as a whole, final reading, etc. would follow afterwards.
Is there any other questions? Councillor Wallace.
Yeah, I don't know if it's appropriate time, just in regards to like in the budget, the allocation of funding for public art is $20,000 and then that's it, or what, I don't know when it was in the line item, it was 2026 to 27, and then there's nothing of a continuum for public art, and we're doing a lot of work with heritage markers on the art, recreation and culture, like we've made that something, one of our what do you call it? Tasks, one of our tasks are to look at heritage, and I worry that we don't in moving forward, that there's no allocated funds in regards to doing that, because yeah, the heritage piece has become a big piece, and even looking at a house when it comes to heritage. So I'm just, yeah, that's just a concern of mine.
Yeah, this is just more like questions, comments, not necessarily debating.
Yeah.
Just for the budget. Councillor White.
Thank you, Mayor. So to the mayor, to Polly, just a quick question regarding the I&I reduction program. It seems like it's the commencement of a pretty critical program, and I see there's an allotment of $100,000 over the next several years, and then it jumps substantially to $500,000-$650,000, I think. Can you, just for my benefit, explain a little bit more about the benefit of that program? Because it obviously seems we're investing a lot. It is infrastructure related, and I guess it's infiltration into our sewer system, but if you could maybe just enlighten me a little bit.
Sure. No. Right. Inflow and infiltration, or I&I, as you said, it's an intrusion of rainwater into the sanitary sewer system. That could either come through a manhole manhole lid that is maybe a little bit lower and you get some ponding, that's the inflow piece. The infiltration is maybe where you get a sanitary sewer that has a crack in it, or there's a joint that's displaced, or it could be where there's been an old service connection that was removed but not fully closed off, so water can get into the system. That water is transported all the way to the regional facilities for treatment. And Metro is now starting to charge for wet weather flows. So obviously it's worse in the wintertime. So what every municipality is tasked with doing is getting inflow and infiltration down to a set level. The challenge is that Metro Vancouver has roughly, pardon me, I'm going to geek out here, this 600 kilometers of trunk sewers. Municipalities in the Lower Mainland have about 12,000 kilometers of sanitary sewers. There's another 12,000 kilometers that are on private property. And that 12,000 kilometers on private property also is in the system. So there are a number of methodologies that municipalities can take to remedy that situation. But it is always a challenge. And as the system ages, it becomes more of an issue for I&I. So the city undertakes flow monitoring to sort of ascertain what the degree of inflow is, filtration is, but also smoke testing as well, where we sort of see as a cross connection that could also be a problem. The city also requires that whenever a house is rebuilt, that a new service connection be put in place to lessen the impact of that. So it's an ongoing situation that we have to do, and what we're seeking to do is every year get a better sense of the system, and then implement a series of strategies that will reduce. And it really doesn't ever eliminate the issue, but it reduces it down to a point that can best be accomplished given the age of the system. As I say, that's been, Metro is taking a more proactive step now, charging a wet weather flow. And so that's impetus for the municipalities to then go in. Get a better handle on I&I, but then also means trying to go in and fix it, which is either replacement, relining, or some job repairs. Thank you.
Councilor.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to move that staff be directed to provide a breakdown of overtime versus regular wages and fire suppression personnel and benefits category for consideration of the 2026 financial plan. Council's consideration of the 2026 financial funds.
Chair, you'll read that out.
Yes.
Otherwise I'll need to have that. I do.
Yeah.
Awesome. Anything else? So with that, then I'll move that we rise report. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilor Soliam. So question, all those in favor? Opposed, so we have two recommendations. Oh, that. All this. Do you want to do those as two separate ones?
Yes.
Okay, so we can do the first one. I think this Penny had a slightly different wording, maybe you agree. It was on
So
some
the 2022 culvert report provided to
Yeah,
council.
second that. Is there any discussion on that? All the question on that, all in favor? Opposed, so carried unanimously. Okay, what is the other one?
Yes.
That staff be directed to provide a breakdown of overtime versus regular wages and the fire suppression personnel and benefits category that are council's consideration in the 2026 financial.
Second. Councilor White, so further discussion.
Yeah, I was into it, from my perspective, I'm trying to determine what's overtime versus what's regular wages, and we think that there could be room for improved transparency in this report, and especially given council has been investing so actively in fire suppression staff specifically within this category. I think that it would be good to get an understanding of how we can mitigate overtime with additional personnel. So I think that ultimately my hope is that being generally in support of generally being in support of the increased fire suppression, it would be another tool to communicate to the public some of the value in the investments that we're making. So that's kind of my thought perspective.
Yeah, so for me, I'll give a perspective, I think, you know, just being in a couple of boards and committees. Being at a high level, I appreciate that, but when we start to get into some of the detail levels on. Wages and overtime and that's really getting into the managerial side of things. And so I don't, for myself, necessarily wanna go deep into that and generate a lot of work on staff's behalf. I mean, we've given them clear instruction, and I believe we've seen that they reduce overtime, that they hire full-time people as appropriate, so. You know, not that I am against transparency, but I just don't wanna create additional work and really get into some of what I would consider more operational as. More level. Anyways, is there any other discussion? Seeing the question, seeing that there is none, I'll call the question, all those in favor? All those opposed? So Counselor James, and White and Albrecht and Wallace, so that is, and sorry, I said James, Wallace, Albrecht, White and myself, so that is defeated. So that brings us to the end, so I'll move that we adjourn. Other seconder, Counselor Sullivan, I'll call the question, all those in favor? Yeah, those listed, thank you.
Find you. Get one. Then, but,
I got it.